Before we get into the subject of today's video, I thought I'd take the opportunity to apologise for not making a video on Thursday as I usually do, but as I had a dentist appointment, my ability to talk was hampered by the feeling of having a stroke. Not to worry though, as I am now almost fully repaired. It was a minor chip, seriously. He numbed half of my face. Never mind. We are going to address an article that I had intended to cover back then, but we're going to do it now, 5 days late. There are other topics I want to cover, and I might try and make shorter videos to cover those because they are either amusing, bemusing, C-musing, or whatever amusing you want to call it. So the article is from the BBC, where a CERN scientist said physics was built by men, not by invitation. Now this particular scientist has been creating a bit of a stir at CERN. CERN, for those that don't remember, is the place where the Higgs boson was actually discovered in 2012. Quite a fascinating place in Geneva. Now, Professor Strumia of Pisa University said that physics was invented and built by men, not by invitation. This is a remark about meritocracy being trounced, which is actually something he talks about in a theory about gender talk, from a paper he called Experimental Test of a New Global Discrete Symmetry, where it says, I will present bibliometric data about fundamental theory and gender and interpret what data means and answer the big question. Now, in this very paper, he uses a series of graphs to show that women were hired over men, whose research was cited more than other scientists in their publications, which is an indicator of higher quality. He also talks about how the physics community, and I'm going to read a direct quote from it, physics is a community of interest optimized to understand nature. 1. Physics does not depend on nation, race, sex, open to good people from any background. Indeed, physics was international when culture served nationalism. 2. Pushing the limits of human brain, physicists heavily selected on interest 1 in every 10, and ability 1 in every 1,000. Indeed, science created the modern world. Not easy. 3. It required developing tough selective rules and a great culture, intellectual honesty, and quantitative evidence. Intellectual honesty is something that has taken quite a large knock over the years, and I think I've demonstrated that on more than one occasion on this channel. And quantitative evidence is where you are able to substantiate a claim through multiple experiments, multiple studies that corroborate a theory, for those that didn't know. Quantitative is also used in economics as a way of printing more money when you don't have it, but that's a discussion for another time, Gordon Brown, you bastard. Now, as you can see from the graphs, he has a point, and this is one of the nasty little things that has crept into the physics community. He is obtaining evidence and presenting it for others to dissect, but their political swaying, let's go with that, belief system even, is clouding their judgment, which means they are not good scientists. If they are offended for the sake of being offended or because of gender, an arbitrary factor in a community where gender plays no part, then they are terrible scientists. They lack intellectual honesty, and I would assume they lack any retrospect, hindsight, the ability to contemplate their own choices, actions, and what they believe, and how it can pollute what they do. Evaluate, ponder, think out, plan, think over, take something into consideration. This is further cemented because the CERN professor Alessandro Strumia has had some of his credentials, some of his slides removed from CERN, the centre itself, because apparently they're not in line with a code of conduct that does not tolerate personal attacks and insults. He is not personally attacking a group of people. He is showing an absolute bias and presenting evidence for people to try and then use their intellectual honesty to either look into it themselves or debunk it. And I don't mean by looking into it themselves that they would accept it. Now, during the workshop where he was presenting this information, he was telling an audience of young, predominantly female physicists that his results proved that physics is not sexist against women. However, the truth does not matter because it is part of a political battle coming from outside, and this is what annoys me about politics and science. See, for years, scientists have been telling the government in this country what drugs should and should not be okay, what should and should not be legal because studies show, and they've done the research. But the government's position has always been to go against that because politics should play no part in science. Because politics, for the most part, while using some fact to support agendas, it's not on par intellectually with that of science. It doesn't stack up. A lot of it is subjective. Look at economic policies, they're so vastly different. You put an economic policy in front of a physicist and they're going to say, the fuck is this shit? Because it's rubbish. It's not creative. I'm going to use the word arbitrary again. It is. It's nonsense that has no real place in the world of physics because they don't care. But when people are being conditioned to be interested in politics as well as physics, or any science for that matter, and I'm not including political science, you know why. Oh, someone's going to get triggered in the comments, I know they are. To the person who will inevitably get triggered by that comment, I don't care. I'm moving on now. But the moment politics starts to infect physics, it will create new problems. Because whether or not you can come at something with a level head and simply address it as a professional without having outside sources tell you, well, this is systemic racism or sexism. And with employment, there are always problems. There have been for years. In the fight for gender or racial equality, you've had the mere representation argument used for years. To combat this, governments have pandered because it got them votes, and they want the young votes, the idealist votes. Whether they entirely agree with them or not, that is a debate for other people. Because I'm too lazy, remember? Now this of course led to the creation of affirmative action, many then arguing that that wasn't enough. We needed more representation, therefore meritocracy had to be put on the back burner in favour of equal representation regardless of talent, which as we all know has the ability to affect KPIs, which I've talked about many times. For those who don't know, it is a key performance indicator. It is a way of maximising the potential of one of your employees by setting a target that is either borderline unattainable, cough Amazon cough, or attainable reasonably. This then maximises your profits. That's what businesses want to do, remember? They exist to make money, until capitalism is overthrown, of course, by Comrade Corbyn. Until then, though, these systems exist, and they shouldn't. They shouldn't anymore. And as we have seen over the years, there are places that do discriminate based on race. BBC is an example. I've talked about this again many times, others have raised it, where they actually exclude UK white nationals from applying for jobs, for certain jobs, creative jobs I believe, because apparently only people of colour have the potential to be creative. If that were true, Michael B. Jordan would not have been prattling on in a Vogue interview about how black people don't have mythical creatures and myths and stuff like that. Them blasted white people and their Loch Ness monster. Terrifying shit, I know. As things like affirmative action still exist, you have issues. It shouldn't exist anymore. I'm gonna put that out there now. That should not exist in this country anymore. I'm sick of it. More representation is done. But now with the political element, if people have a political bias and they interview you, that person's political bias may well influence who they decide to hire, as well as whether or not they are made or encouraged, either by some hokum law, to hire people because of gender, race or sexuality or religion, or whether they are going to instead pursue meritocracy because that is the best way to get the very best creative minds in one of the most important fields in the world. These people pioneer. By introducing political elements, those people become less creative because they're instead looking at it from a very different, or through a very different lens. This particular lens has elements that cannot be truly quantified in science. Victimhood is bullshit in modern Western democracies. I am not denying racism exists, by the way, but the moment you start to deny people work based on their race, regardless of the supposed power structures, you are racist. Now, since this has all happened, Professor Strumia has been punished a bit, and it's gotten a bit much, but he has doubled down and he is using it to point out behavioural research which he has suggested may account for the disparity in why careers don't progress as much for women as they do for men. These comments, with the research he shows, and I've linked it below, line up. I would of course recommend anyone with a scientific mind, of course, go out there and either conduct your own research or find other research that corroborates it. Now later in the article he does reference some things, and I do want to debunk those. The first one was the claim that Oxford University extends exam times for women's benefit. Yes and no. They do, but they also have that for men as well. Italy offers free or cheaper university for female research students. Yes and no. Again, yes and no. Somebody has criticised him. It's Dr. Jessica Wade, a physicist at Imperial College London, where she said there were young women and men exchanging ideas and their experiences on how to encourage more women into the subject and to combat discrimination in their careers. Then this man gets saying all this horrible stuff. Horrible stuff. It's not what you said, but how you said it. I don't understand how such a forward-thinking organisation like CERN, guilt by association of course, which does so much to promote diversity in research, could have invited him to speak to young people just starting off in their research careers when his ideas are so well known. The problem arises for you is that you're not accepting that research has been done showing why women are less interested in certain subjects. For example, men like to work with things, women like to interact with people. This is proven. You claim it's a discredited idea. It's not. Guys like to tinker, girls like to talk. I know that I've dumbed that down, but I figured, even though you're a physicist at Imperial College London, lol, I would dumb it down to your IQ level. CERN have released a statement, and I thought I'd finish off with this. CERN is a culturally diverse organisation bringing together people from dozens of nationalities. It is a place where everyone is welcome, and all have the same opportunities regardless of ethnicity, beliefs, gender or sexual orientation, an argument which Professor Stumia argues against. He does not believe this to be true. All in all, this is a mess. An absolute mess. It's not on par with like the Kavanaugh nomination, but it's a mess. Whenever a physicist, a prominent male one at that, raises the subject of sexism and shows that there is an issue in science where gender politics is infecting. I get you want to get more girls interested in STEM, I do, but you don't do it by forcing it, because there will always be an inevitable pushback, and you can't just cry screams of sexism when evidence is shown at you. Unless you debunk it, all you're doing is looking like a child. The BBC article finishes by referencing Professor Tim Hunt for comments he made, all of which are out of context and do not paint the entire picture where everyone laughed. Everyone agreed. One person took offence. That person was a colossal twat. So I hope everyone has a lovely Sunday, and thank you all for listening.
Oh, goddams.
In your arse.
Imagine my shock